Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new GigaOM webcast. Today, we will talk about rethinking data protection for the hybrid cloud era. I'm Enrico Signoretti, storage analyst at GigaOM Research, and today with me, I have Sean Darrington, Senior Director of Product Management at StorageCraft. Hi, Sean, how are you today?
Doing great, Enrico. How are you?
I'm feeling great, thank you. And maybe we can start with a little bit of introduction about you, your role, and the company.
Yeah, so at StorageCraft, we've been a long-time company, but really focusing on protecting customers' information, and that comes in a couple of forms through data protection, but also scale-out storage. And so we have solutions ranging from small enterprise, small customers to mid-sized enterprises and large enterprises, depending upon which problems customers are trying to solve. And at StorageCraft, I head up product management for OneSafe, which is our converged scale-out storage and data protection solution that we'll be talking a little bit about later today.
Fantastic. And on my side, as I told you, I'm Enrico Signoretti, storage analyst for GigaOM. I'm doing this work since, I don't know, forever. So always covering data storage and lately also cloud computing. So before going on with the presentation, I want to give you a couple of information. Probably on the right of your screen, you have a small control panel where you can see a couple of tabs. The most important is the questions tab. If you have any question about the presentation, what we are saying, curiosity, just put it there and we will try to answer it as soon as possible. The idea is that we want to make this conversation as interactive as possible. So not between the two of us, but actually with you guys as well. And also we are going to run 3 polls during this webinar. And the idea is to get your opinion on some of the topics that we cover or about what you are doing with your infrastructure. And we will share this information with you in real time. At the end of the session, of course, we will have a Q&A session as well. So for those that will be late in putting their questions in the tab that you have in the control panel, don't worry. And that's it. Without any further ado, let's start with the agenda. So we will talk about why protecting hybrid cloud infrastructure is different, and then we will start to going a little bit deeper on a few of the most important topics today, including cybersecurity, cloud-based services like disaster recovery as a service, data protection and data management. And we will recap at the end everything by talking about the key criteria for evaluating hybrid cloud data protection, which is also the topic of one of my latest reports. And as I said, we will end this webinar with a Q&A session. So let's start with the first part, the first poll of the day. How would you define your infrastructure? And there are 5 possible answers: on-premises only, distributed, meaning on-premises plus edge, hybrid, on-premises, cloud, and edge. So your infrastructure is pretty complex at this point. Cloud only, because you are going towards a cloud only strategy, or cloud plus edge. So you are removing your on-premise and you are keeping cloud and edge locations. So the pop-up window came up. So please answer the to one of the points, and we'll see the result, and we will comment with you. Sean, what's your opinion? I mean, in your experience as a vendor, what do you see in the field from your customers at this point?
Yeah, I think we'll see definitely at least cloud as part of it. Like I think we're going to see probably the on-prem only being the fewest selected. A lot of organizations are looking to a cloud strategy, whether that be for a percentage of the applications. Not many are doing 100% cloud only. So I think the on-prem only and the cloud only, those two extremes, are going to be the outliers, and distributed, I think, is going to take the lead.
Yeah, also on our experience at Geekhome, hybrid is taking the lion's share. I mean, everybody's thinking hybrid lately. There are very few that are cloud only. There is this important aspect about the edge, but it's growing, but it's not still there. I mean, it's still um, a little part of the of the entire infrastructure. In fact, as you can see, uh, hybrid has the 65% of the answers, followed by, at a long distance actually, on-prem, distributed, and cloud only. Which so everybody is going to hybrid, as we said, and cloud plus edge is a very, very corner case at this point. Very good. Let's start with the actual presentation then, and so why prioritizing hybrid cloud infrastructure in different? Okay, from my point of view, when I started doing this job, we are talking about 25, 30 years ago. Okay, there was only on-premises IT. Everything was much simpler than today. I mean, we had backup windows. We had the ability to stop production, to restore data. Sometimes, even if you needed a lot of time to restore your data, IT was not that important at the time. Things changed radically over time. We started seeing a distributed IT coming up. Okay, first with the PCs, but then with larger branch offices, remote locations in general, and we needed mechanisms to connect this, to backup also the remote locations. Some of them, especially because connectivity was a problem, had local servers. And now, after a few years, we started seeing mobile devices that become laptops and smartphones. So computers that also in this case needed a protection. And also in this case, they were connected with different mechanisms, with different kind of infrastructure to the core. This added complexity, but this is only beginning, because then we had the cloud. The cloud changed a little bit of everything. Also, connectivity was more complex, but we started talking about edge location in general, thinking more about our remote location, our remote offices and mobile devices. And also connectivity changed a little bit, because we needed to talk with the cloud, and there was no reason for the remote location to talk with your HQ or your primary data center to talk then to the cloud, but actually the connection was much more direct, and we saw a lot of different ways to do that. I mean, internet was the first one, VPNs, and of course we had SD-WAN now. So things are getting more and more complex, with more connection all over the place appearing. And now finally SaaS applications. Okay, we moved some of our application, in some cases the ERP, in other cases the CRM, Office was moved, oh, it's moving at least in that direction. So we see less mail servers, and they are backuped in a totally different way than we saw in the past. And again and again, other types of connection popping up, complicating our life as system administrators, as IT manager, and so on. So this is the picture that we have today. But the complexity is now that we don't have only on-prem IT to backup, and everything is created and consumed in different location. This is the real problem with hybrid cloud infrastructure data protection. Okay, and maybe I can ask you, Sean, here, what do you think about this picture? I mean, we saw a minute ago that most of the people are targeting hybrid cloud data protection now, and this is becoming the scenario that we see in almost every enterprise organization. Do you see something like this? Does it make sense from your perspective?
Yeah, and the complexity you talked about, Enrico, is not only just the application design between on-prem and or hybrid deployments, but it's also the storage and the data protection strategy that's going to recover those applications in the event of failure, and whatever type of failure. Obviously, there are different degrees, but when you're doing and have a hybrid strategy with applications running in the cloud that are also perhaps dependent upon SaaS-based applications as well as on-prem services. You have to coordinate those recovery and that protection of those applications in a way that you can recover in a coordinated fashion. And in particular, even though you saw like 65% of the people were looking at the hybrid deployment model, there's still a lot of systems that are on premises, right? A lot of virtual systems and even a lot of physical systems that can benefit from a solid storage strategy for serving up that information, as well as having a combined way to protect those applications, to have different recovery points based upon the priority of those applications. As IT administrators look at the portfolio of applications they have, not all of them are going to be the most critical. They're going to have a balanced strategy, but being able to determine what's that recovery strategy look like for the different applications and the criticality of the organization.
Right. So at the end, to recap a little bit on this very complex slide, is that we now create and consume data in different locations, and you have to protect this data. The mechanisms to protect data are several now. It's not just your local server that you have to protect, but you have virtualized environments, physical environments, you have the cloud, SaaS application, devices in remote collaboration. So your strategy is totally different, and also there are a couple of other challenges. One is that everything is 7/24 now. You can't stop anything. So it's not just protecting your data, it's also how quick you are able to recover your data. And also, of course, in the correct sequence, because it's useless that you are able to recover maybe a database without having the ability to recover the virtual machines where this database is installed, for example. And this is just a very, very simple example. So let's go and talk about other complications that we are putting on top now with the latest things that are happening in this world. One is disaster recovery. Okay, when we talk about disaster recovery, we talk about the ability, okay, not only disaster recovery, sorry, but also business continuity. Okay, I mentioned that there is no longer backup window. There is no longer the time to stop your IT, and everything is 7/24. Everybody wants to access their data all the time, every day of the year. So you need a disaster recovery. So every data protection plan should bring also some disaster recovery capabilities with it. And this is very important. The other important thing that is happening to everybody, especially here in Europe now with GDPR, for example, okay, you want to be sure that everything is compliant. I'm not talking about only data protection here, but I will tell you later why this is important. The important part of the compliance is that you want to check that the data you're storing, wherever they are stored and whatever they are protecting, are compliant with the law. And GDPR is just an example. There are compliance regulations now also in California, for example, and many other states are starting to do the same. So similar regulation for privacy, for rules to treat your data, and so on. And last but not least, one of the most challenging threats today is cybersecurity. Cyber attacks are everywhere. Okay, malware, ransomware in particular. You need to find a strategy to protect your data against this. Sometimes you can think about, cyber attacks as another form of disaster recovery, because if they wipe out all your data because it's encrypted, then you are, stranded without anything to work on. But actually, these are treated a little bit different than disaster recovery from a catastrophe. And so these are other and new challenges, and this is complicated even more all the situation here. I don't know, Sean, but I think that in all these points you have something to add. I mean, how complex is the situation today? What do you find from the field?
Yeah, I think you're right. We talked about on the previous slide different deployment options for systems and applications, and that's certainly delivering a lot more benefits to organizations, but it's also increasing the complexity as you discussed. On this, what compounds that deployment challenge is two things. Number one, kind of taken from the right side first, is cybersecurity. Ransomware is becoming a hot topic among our customers as they look to protect themselves against obviously an infection from a security perspective, right? Intrusion detection, perimeter firewalls, et cetera, employee education about phishing URL attacks and so forth. But ultimately, we're really seeing IT administrators expecting to be infected at some point with ransomware and having some portion of their systems compromised. And it's a question about how they're going to get that information back without paying a ransom. If you're in a healthcare vertical, there are fines associated with every medical record that is exposed, but we're also seeing the ransomware target state and local governments, those types of organizations that are really bound to pay a ransom if they can't get the information back. And so we haven't even really talked about the type of data that companies are managing, because the unstructured data is the larger percentage of the storage capacity within most organizations, as well as it's the most unwieldy and unpredictable in terms of growth. And that's exactly the type of data that cyber criminals target, really for profit, not for notoriety anymore, but really for profit. And so having a way to manage and protect unstructured data and recover that from a cybersecurity threat is something that a lot of our customers are looking at, as well as the broader DR and business continuity of the combination of structured and unstructured data. The good news is that, fortunately, with a lot of virtual servers, multi-site deployments, there's option for replication of systems to another location, and depending upon criticality, warm standbys versus cold standbys versus leveraging cloud as a DR as a service. So it kind of comes back to the deployment options we were talking about earlier about how can an organization and administration think about recovering the data between structured and unstructured, and what type of threat are they trying to protect themselves against. And you mentioned the compliance, right? They have to be able to, as part of the normal business process, the right to forget in the EU as an example, that has to fit into the strategy as well. So as more information is created, applications are delivering more benefits, but at the same time, there are complexities in the deployment options.
Yes, and as you said, there are complexities, and most of the time, unstructured data is also the easier to attack. I mean, it's the most exposed, the most accessible, and so you have to take in account the different types of data you are protecting and how. So let's go a little bit deeper in the details. So let's give our listeners some information and going to how how we can think about data protection and just think about the best practices. I think that one of the best things that we can do is to keep it simple. I mean, to not overlay, to not put too many different point solution in place. Try to keep your data protection infrastructure as simple as possible, observable, monitorable, and this is the very basic stuff. Another suggestion that I always give to my clients is to avoid the creation of silos. I mean, we already have plenty of silos. We worked for years to remove data center silos. There is no reason to create them again. I know you have on-premises, you have the cloud, SaaS, and remote offices, and you want to, it's just easier to create these silos different data repositories also for your backup, for your infrastructure. Actually, it's easy at the beginning. It's complicated later for data management, for applying policies, for everything. So at least if you can consolidate, because it's expensive, everything in one place, think about creating a virtual domain of all your data, okay? And we will go a little bit deeper on that later. In fact, what is the best way to reuse a no silo data repository? Okay, a no silo domain view of your data. It's the fact that you can reuse your data. There are several opportunities to reuse your the data that you are protecting, and we will talk about it later during this this webinar. But think about it. It's from my point of view, these are the very basic concept. Do you want to add something here, Sean?
No, I think you covered it well. I think taking an approach as much as possible of consistency, as opposed to just trying to optimize a particular project or optimize a particular application, can wind up creating more complexity than if you take a step back and look at the infrastructure as a whole.
Yeah, and there is more. So I have a few more points. One is to be flexible. Okay, think always about flexibility, about finding ways to not only to think about your backup repository as a whole, but actually be flexible about restore your data. Okay, where you can restore your data, having a location where you can restore your data. One thing that I really like, for example, is disaster recovery as a service. Okay, many of these systems in the market allow you to backup data from several locations to the cloud, and you are not spending more money than the actual capacity you are using. But if you need to use some computer resources, you can restart your virtual machines, everything. They can be converted in real time if necessary, and you have your environment up and running again in a matter of minutes sometimes. So the flexibility of thinking about a much broader kind of infrastructure is really important now. So you don't have only your own premises and you have to recover data only on your premises, or if you have your remote location, you can recover only on your HQ for disaster recovery, for example. There are several other options now. And the other thing is be prepared for further infrastructure changes. We saw that in the last 10 years, so from the time we had the first smartphones up to now, with SaaS, with cloud, with everything that happened in between, it's the infrastructure keeps changing. So be prepared to have as we told before, keep it simple, be flexible, and be prepared to how your infrastructure evolves. So I think maybe you have something to add here about flexibility and infrastructure, Sean.
Yeah, I think this really comes to being adaptable to changes, and and that's the one constant that we can all count on, is that things are going to continue to change. And so the question is, where can you leverage cloud differently going forward than you are today, or do you actually bring things back on premises? We have customers that have a lot of unstructured data stored in the cloud, and the initial thought is that cloud storage is going to be inexpensive. However, it turns out not always to be the case. And so in some cases, people are bringing data back and repatriating back to on-premises solutions, but they still have to be able to protect those applications and that data. So now they're thinking about being flexible about protecting it on-premises as opposed to protecting just a cloud-based storage solution for those applications. So, change is always a constant.
Yeah, and also consider that we saw it several times, people thinking about the cloud, the SaaS application as the perfect word. You don't need to worry about your data. Actually, turns out that if you don't back up your data, you can lose your data also from a SaaS application, because they provide you only the guarantee that the infrastructure won't lose your data, but if you delete something, it's deleted. So these kind of things are all they all came up later, okay, not at the very beginning. So when you adopt a new technology, be prepared to be flexible, to change your strategies and so on. So, but let's go even deeper with each one of the topics that we already covered. So cybersecurity is for me the biggest threat today. Okay, you can read it every day on the news. There are some attacks. Somebody stole some data, encryption through the ransomware attacks, and so on. They can destroy a company. Okay, they can destroy an organization. You have to find mechanisms to avoid to lose everything. And the first thing that you can do is backup. Okay, there is no real protection against some of these attacks. Okay, some of these attacks are new, so and they are silent. They take hundreds of days before becoming active. Okay, I read about 160, 170 days before some of the most common ransomware attacks start showing their effects. Okay, so and it's not always perimeter security that saves you, because when you start importing your data, maybe from a USB key, from an external drive, you maybe start importing something that is not that is infected somehow. So, and another thing is create always an air gap between data and backups. Creating an air gap means that it's better, way better, if you can't access directly your backups from the same location where you can access data. Sometimes it's just a logical feature. I mean, you can, for example, create a clone that is read-only, so that nobody can read your backup. Okay, or you can have store your data on an object store that has that is immutable. Okay, there are some APIs that allow to create this immutability, so that nobody can write the same object again. And of course, there is another thing that is quite important. Always analyze your backup. Okay, you know, if you are used to have a 5%, 3% data changed in one day, and suddenly you see a 10% change, there is something wrong. There is no possibility that there isn't something happening in your data. So these are the very basic, the first suggestion that I give you. Of course, there are more, but again, this is the very basic things that you should think about. I don't know, Shana, if you want to add something here.
Yeah, I think the takeaway from for me here is that backup the way that we've been doing it for the last couple of decades isn't going to satisfy the requirements of today, and particularly going forward. So thinking about backup strategies differently than I'm going to take either an API-based snapshot and I'm going to protect all my information in that sense, I think works for a certain number of applications in the portfolio, particularly the VMs and the physical servers. However, coming back to that structured and unstructured data, if you think about protecting your information differently, if you think about protecting your unstructured data, the largest capacity differently with like object storage that can provide immutable and continuous snapshots of that data, you are creating an air gap between your primary data and the snapshots that are protecting that. And then you can just determine how long you want to keep those snapshots. And because an object store like OneSafe uses underneath the covers, all the snapshots are deduplicated against the primary storage. So while it looks like normal NFS or SMB shares that are accessible for that unstructured data, you actually have that air gap and that immutable object that's protected against any ransomware or deletion. Because even if that ransomware does infect an entire map network drive or an entire backup file, right? Those snapshots that are protecting the backup files or the snapshots that are protecting the unstructured data, all that those original objects are still there. They cannot be deleted or modified by the ransomware or even just accidental deletion or system corruption, right? And so from there, that allows you to do a couple things. Number one, Enrico, you talked earlier on at the beginning about the backup windows essentially going to zero, right? And if you look at the unstructured data being the larger percentage, maybe 50, maybe 75% of your data in the organization, now you're not actually backing that up in the traditional sense. You're not moving it from storage A to a storage target, right? You're actually just taking snapshots. Now you're still taking data protection snapshots for applications running in VMs or physical servers and moving that from a primary storage to a target storage. But you can think about doing things differently where you're having finer grained recovery points, even as short as every 90 seconds for that unstructured data. And you have an immutable protection against accidental deletion or ransomware infection, right? The different types of threats that you need to protect against, obviously one being cybersecurity that's getting a lot of attention in the news as of late.
Okay, very good. And let's go on with cloud disaster recovery and business continuity. I added the cloud because earlier I was mentioned only disaster recovery, but actually we are seeing a lot of interest in the cloud disaster recovery lately because there are a lot of organizations, especially small organizations, they can afford a secondary data center for disaster recovery or things like that. So from my point of view, yes, it's true. The cloud is someone else's computer, but it's a computer. It's a fully functional, and you can use it. You can rent it, okay? And the important thing is that it's a subscription. It's a pay-as-you-go model. It's very cheap, so you can think about disaster recovery in at least in two ways. Okay, so you have your primary data center and you have a secondary standby data center. Okay, so you're paying for all of it. It's very expensive. It's hard to maintain. Also, doing DR drills and all the testing, everything. It's quite difficult. Why? Instead, you don't think about the cloud. So why don't go to the cloud? Because you can store your data to the cloud. This is very, very cheap because it's just the storage. You don't have to touch it very often. And then only if you need it. And then only if you need to do a test once a month, you can spin up your virtual machines in the cloud, do whatever you need, and test your backup, or maybe there was an actual disaster and you want to run it in production. So this is a way to limit the complexity at the end of your infrastructure. So some of the infrastructure disappears. It's very, it's less expensive. And of course, you can take anyway advantage of existing processes because all the sequence on which you need to start your virtual machines, for example, your application doesn't change. So the process of disaster recovery doesn't change too much. It's just that it has to be adapted to a new media, to a new data center. But actually, the same things run, and also it run immediately when you need it. So there is no activity whatsoever that you have to do beforehand. So it's very easy, and most of the time these kind of processes are orchestrated by the solution that you have in place. Sean, do you want to add something on the disaster recovery side of things?
Yeah, I think as you're thinking about DR and business continuity, there are a couple of cloud deployment options that customers can take advantage of. The simplest and possibly the least expensive is just to actually replicate the data into S3 or Azure or GCP as a storage target, right? And then in the event of a recovery, you're actually going to go through and recover those applications yourself and spin up the VMs and recover that data. That's definitely one option. A lot of our customers do that. But the other option is to look at more of the DR as a service that you were mentioning at the end, Enrico, where the provider is actually coordinating and orchestrating which VMs or physical servers are going to be recovered in what order for the system and storage and network connectivity back to the on-premises users, right? So the data and the application is actually recovered in the cloud very quickly, but it's providing network access back to the users that are on premises. So two different options as you look at that, and whether with StorageCraft, or whether you're looking at the OneSafe converged solution for data protection and replicating those backups into either our cloud for full DR as a service or S3 or Azure, you can certainly do that. Even with ShadowSafe, which is our software-only deployment for data protection, you have that same option to take advantage of where you would like to replicate that data to. And if you want to replicate it to another co-location that you have, that's certainly an option as well. So it doesn't have to be a third-party cloud provider. So there are options to, obviously, depending on the size of your organization and sophistication of the staff there, you can do it yourself. The other thing to think about is the failover that we were speaking mostly about, but don't forget about failback, right? And that's one of the things that you need to look at from a cost perspective, the egress and the networking from cloud providers, but then also just the physical data movement. How long is that planned failback process going to take?
Yeah, indeed. So, and again, compliance. I left this one as the last of the three because it's a new thing for a lot of people. Okay, so disaster recovery and cyber attack are in the mind of everybody. Compliance a little bit less. I mean, if you are a large organization, if you are in Europe, yes, it's happening now in the US, but it's still smaller when compared to the others. So as I said, GDPR is only the beginning. There are more and more regulations, more and more policies that we have to comply with. It's becoming a mess, and backup can be of help in this case, because you can by avoiding the silos, as I said earlier, okay, you have a huge big data lake, and you can do whatever you need, starting, for example, from policy-driven pattern matching and alerting, meaning the search for a pattern in your files. Verify, for example, if you are storing credit card numbers or social security numbers, and you don't want to store them in clear, of course, because somebody could steal this information, and it's not something that the GDPR allows. So you want an alert and say, oh, look, your user John is doing this, is saving an Excel file with credit card numbers of your customer. It doesn't work that way. So you have to stop it, and you have to delete that file. And another thing, it's having reports. What is happening in my system? Okay, by having these functionalities, I can get reports, analytics on what is happening in the system. Am I following the rules? Am I not? And so on. And last but not least, a search data across all your organization. Okay, legal reasons, everything. So think about you are in a legal dispute, and you need to find everything about a particular project. What do? Today it's quite impossible, but actually you have all of it in your backup files. Even if it's distributed in all around your organization, you can easily, with the right tool, make search and retrieve all your data from one single interface. Maybe this can really help to improve a lot of processes in your organization. What do you think about this, Sean?
I agree. It's only the beginning. Your first bullet there says it all. I think that we're going to see a lot of cases tried within Europe, but also here within the U.S. As you were mentioning earlier, California is instituting other privacy laws similar. And so there are guidelines and rules and regulations that are laid out So we as administrators for storage and data protection confer with your legal counsel, because there's a lot of interpretations about the guidelines and what and how that impacts data protection and storage, right? And as part of the regulations, one of the things it says is it can't interrupt with normal business process. And so if your business is, you have to back up all of your applications, you can't necessarily pull out an individual piece of content from a backup from 6 months ago and overwrite those backups or delete them if somebody, through that process. And so there are implications. I'm certainly not legal counsel, so everybody, I think, within the organization is going to have to look at that. But then keeping an eye on what we see going through the courts about how these guidelines and these compliance and regulations actually impact the business, but then also the storage and the data protection side of the business. I think that's going to be something everybody has to be flexible and be responsive about.
Yep. And so we have another poll now. What is your priority for data protection strategy? So after listening to us talking about all these points, what is your highest priority? So protect data efficiently, always with an eye to the budget, of course, disaster recovery, protection against cyber attacks, compliance, and of course, all of the above. I mean, I already have my idea on this. Maybe we will wait a few seconds to get the results of the poll, but I don't know if you have a guess, Sean, on this.
I think my thought is that I think number one is probably going to take the lead, because data protection is always something, unfortunately, that's sometimes an afterthought. And so it's always, how do you do as much with as little budget as possible, right? And sometimes we've worked with customers where they have no budget and they say, go fix this problem, right? And so that's obviously not a doable solution for every company, but it's going to be, I think that's going to be number one. I think the three, and then DR is going to be second. The question is going to be if people select all the above, if they see two of them that are their highest priorities, right? So we'll see how that poll turns out.
Mm-hmm. Well, from my point of view, I'm pretty sure that protection against cyber attacks is pretty high in the priorities of end users, and we'll see in a second. So the results are coming very, very quickly, and a few more seconds to see what happens. We are already pretty high in the numbers. A couple of seconds more. So as I said, protection against cyber attacks, I'm pretty sure will be high. And yes, of course, everybody looks at data protection and want to so there is a question here. Well, actually, it's a statement. There is a guy saying, my personal answer is all of them. But unfortunately, the organization is about the budget.
Yeah.
It's all about budget. And
another case in point, right? Do everything with no money.
Okay, let's see the results now, and we have all of the above. Okay, so they want it all.
Yeah, well, it's interesting that nobody selected just compliance, right? Which is interesting.
Yeah, it's quite interesting. Yes, I think it's low in the priorities, especially when the organization are not very large. I mean, and in many cases the teams are different. I mean, nobody thinks about data protection as a point where you collect all your data in your organization and you can start to do more. Disaster recovery and cyber attacks is something that now is ingrained in the mentality of sysadmins and everybody. So they have the mechanism, but actually compliance is still a new thing. Okay, but let's go on with the presentation now and see what else we can say about protecting hybrid cloud infrastructure. So from my point of view, this is a graphic that I use very often in my presentations, and it's a little bit of a recap of what we said so far. Okay, the process for which we are doing disaster data protection is changing. Okay, and for us, after we protected your data, so we collected all your data, there is this data discovery mechanism that is in place now, and is more and more vendors are starting to adopt. So everything is cataloged and indexed, also because you need it for keeping your database with all your backups when things are backed up and so on. So you can browse your history, okay, and retrieve your files. But then there is other things that are happening, including analysis of your data to get reports, more reports than in the past, what is happening in your infrastructure, and then you can take actions. And in the past, it was not possible. Okay, actions, it's pretty easy. Okay, the first thing that I'm seeing happening, or also the customer are interesting, information lifecycle management. Okay, if you start to get reports from your backup infrastructure that says, look, you have some data in a very precious location, very expensive primary storage, and you are not accessing the data since, I don't know, forever. And this is important. So this is the message that tells you that you can move this data in another location. Of course, we talked about compliance, as we saw. This audience is not really interested, but this is another important thing that you can do. You can check if you are compliant with company policies and, of course, with external regulation. But then there is more. As we said, there is security and threat management. This is a very important chunk of modern data protection now. Okay, we are treating cyber attacks as forms of disaster, okay, that are not sustainable with traditional security. Backup is your last man standing for this kind of attacks. And then we have data augmentation. We are talking, from now on, we are talking more about wishful thinking, or very leading edge applications. Okay, once you have all your data, you can start to browse your data, you can start to crawl in your data, you can start to augment it. Think about you are backupping your unstructured data, and tomorrow you can tag all the pictures that are in your file servers. So you know that you are storing a lot of cat pictures. Okay, maybe it's your enterprise corporate file server, and you don't want to start to save cat pictures, but actually with a lot of mechanisms that are in place, machine learning and so on, you can do that. Okay, this is, well, maybe the most stupid example. Maybe you can classify your documentation, you can classify your files and understand what is in your system. Okay, and for example, you can find all the Word documents that contain a contract, things like that. And then this enable many other options. Okay, big data analytics on your files, on your repository. At the end, again, if you build a single huge repository, no silos, you have a big data lake. How many things you can do? Okay, you can start using officially your data. You can start using it effectively. And it enables, again, other machine learning and AI. So you have the data, it's tagged, it's ready. You can tailor a data set for a specific workload, machine learning workload, understand from your documents. I mentioned that you can understand what's stored in your data. So think about, you can select all the contracts that are in your corporation, and starting from there to get all the contracts, start from there to understand if they are properly formatted, and so on. It's a very powerful possibility. We are not there yet, but actually we are getting closer. And then last but not least, because you have all this information, you can start thinking about semantic search. So no longer searching for a keyword, but actually a phrase that describes the content. Okay, I want all the documents that talk about buildings in central New York because I am a real estate agent and I want to check all my work in the last year in the central New York. And you can do that in the future. Some of this is wishful thinking, as I said, but actually, if you connect all the dots with what we have today from data protection solutions and where we are heading, this is where we are going. I hope that this helps to understand better the large picture and why I'm telling you to not create silos and to do more with your data. Sean, I talked a lot on this one. Maybe there is a comment that you have from the storage craft perspective.
Yeah, I think this is a great thing to think about, and you really laid out a lot of options. And for those that are, looking at this, you can begin in certain places and then grow into some of these other capabilities. So don't think that you need to do everything at once. But also going back to, where at the top of the slide here says how to reuse and create value from your backups. Keep in mind that backups doesn't have to be in the traditional sense of backup recovery, as I mentioned earlier, right? Being able to protect unstructured data and mine the unstructured data in a different way, perhaps by cloning shares that are deduplicated against others. You can tear down, do your analytics, find what you need, and then delete the share without consuming any additional capacity, or cloning a backup file and then mounting that in a different way. So there's different ways to accomplish this. And so, when you talk about leveraging the information within your backups, it's really about leveraging the information within your organization. It's just a question about which copy of that data are you going to begin to do as much or as little analytics as you're capable of at the beginning, and then grow into other things like machine learning and AI. And certainly depending upon your business, there are going to be different parts of this that are going to be more important than others to different organizations based upon your vertical and the business priorities. But you can start somewhere. You don't have to do everything from the beginning.
Right, and of course, yes. So we talk about a lot of potential things, but some of them are already there. As you mentioned, snapshot clones. Of course, we are changing the way we think about our infrastructure, the development models, and if you need to organize a test environment for your application, you can get a copy of your data from a clone. Okay, something that was impossible a few years ago. It's very, very important to have it today because you can speed up a lot of development processes. And not all of it is the future. Some of it is really present today. Let's go very quickly because we are a little bit late and we have also some questions to answer. Let's use this slide as a recap and also as a suggestion on what to do to find the best solution for your hybrid cloud data protection infrastructure. So first of all, think about analytics. Okay, as I said, you are collecting all the data of your company. Start thinking about analytics. Start thinking about reports. Start thinking about what is happening in your infrastructure. This gives you a lot of insights at all levels: sysadmin, IT manager, CIO, whatever. You can have different reports. You can have different information. What is happening? Planning on your budget and so on. There are disaster recovery orchestration. We talked about this a lot during this presentation. Think about it. Okay, if it is integrated in your data protection strategy, meaning the backup solution, it's just easier. Okay, don't think about building it on your own. There are tools out there that are ready, fully functional. They provide disaster recovery as a service, so they are not even very expensive, and it can be done very, very easily. Again, security. Think about everything security. Cyber attacks are the first thing. Encrypting your backup, of course, is very good for your safety, day-to-day safety. I mean, you don't want that anybody takes your backups and can read it, but actually cyber attacks again are a key point for everybody today. They are on top of their priority list. Find a solution that is good with this kind of thing. Fast recovery and copy data management. I mentioned it 1 minute ago. So having the ability to run your backup quickly in production, maybe directly from the backup target, it's amazing. Means that you can recover a situation in a few minutes instead of hours sometimes. Okay, having the ability to copy your data multiple times starting from the backup, you can give your developers, you can give your users a lot of opportunities to test their application and their processes without impacting in production. And again, data management and governance. Okay, we talked about compliance, we talked about a global search. There are several things that you can start think about your backup. Okay, again, the basic remains to avoid silos. The basic is to find solutions that give you opportunities, but we are going there. Even if in our small poll it was 0, it's getting there. And of course, last but not least, there is the breadth of the solution. I mean, avoid point solutions. Okay, not a solution for each single. This is probably is the point that sums it all. So don't. It's easier at the very beginning to find a point solution. I mean, you start thinking about SaaS. Done. Okay, let's do a backup with a SaaS solution that backups my SaaS services. Okay, it's good, it works, but actually you created a silo. So you can search your data, you can do anything about the things that I told you before. So think about solutions that provide you as many options as possible. I know it's difficult, I know in some cases it's not even possible, but actually limit the number of backup solutions you are adopting. And I think with this slide is complete. Maybe Sean, you want to add something on this?
The only thing I was gonna add here, Enrico, is that as you're looking at these different requirements, different applications are going to have different, either backup windows or restore performance requirements. So looking again for a consistent solution that can be either a hard drive based solution for more of a capacity oriented play for those budget conscious organizations, but also all flash, right? So OneSafe has different deployment options. The same software that we've been speaking about actually is an all flash or hard drive based cluster. You can start with exactly what you need and scale it over time. So if you need that performance for a fast recovery, if you're looking at engineering CAD CAM files and you want to do high speed file serving for that, but protect with unlimited snapshots, you can do that with all flash. And maybe for a different set of applications, it's hard drive based cluster, but it's all managed the same way. So you're not creating silos, even though you're looking at different storage technologies, the hardware part of it, to satisfy those requirements. So keep that in mind as well.
Yeah, of course. Avoid creating silos. Sometimes it's just that you need a management system on top of it that manages it all. And even if you are creating physical silos, which is hard to avoid in this case. But that's it. So let me drive to the last poll here. What are the criteria that will influence your decisions on the next data protection solutions? So we are very, very almost at the top of the hour. So analytics, DR orchestration, security, data management and governance, breadth of the solution. Let's go with the poll. And so, I mean, from my point of view, I wrote this paper, so this report. So for me, it's all of them. But what's your opinion, Sean?
Well, if you had to select one, Enrico, instead of all of them, which would it be?
Oh yes, but in this case, I try to put it.
You do have one or
different.
more. I think you're going to see the breadth of the solution. I think security is probably going to be number 2, and then data management number 3.
Very good. Let's see how many have responded already. And okay, let's wait 2 more seconds. The results are coming in very, very quickly. I know this is a tough one. We are almost.
But at least we didn't throw in the budget question there. right? So we give people that flexibility. If money was no object.
Yeah, I know that budget is always a problem for everybody, so I try to avoid that kind of question.
Yeah.
But anyway, oh, it's interesting that we are pretty balanced
Yeah.
in the answers, and data management and data governance is getting some interesting. Of course, security is very high, but all in all, I think yes. So the key criteria that we analyzed in the previous slide and the part of my report are the most important. There is not a real most important one. There's all of them are important for our listeners. This is very good, and unfortunately, we reached the top of the hour, so I have to wrap up here. It's a shame because we have a few questions, but actually we will answer to this question offline via email, and we can keep the conversation going on the internet, on Twitter. So you can contact us, me personally on eSignoretti and on Twitter. Sean, what is your Twitter handle?
At Sean Darrington.
Okay, very good. And thank you, StorageCraft, for sponsoring this webinar, and thank you, Gigam, for the infrastructure here. What else? Thank you again, and bye-bye.